What would you choose? A bowl of noodles or the bus ride home? For 17-year-old Min Yoongi, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was his daily reality. And the decision he made over and over again would set him on a path that nobody could have predicted. March 9th, 1993. Daegu, South Korea. Yoongi was born into poverty that most people can't imagine. His family barely scraped by, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment where dreams felt like fantasies. At 13, he heard Stony Skunk's Reggae Muffin and something inside him shifted. Music wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was oxygen. He started writing lyrics obsessively, filling notebooks with rhymes and verses his parents would never understand. Rap wasn't mainstream in early 2000s Korea. It was underground, rebellious, worthless in the eyes of traditional families. His father found those notebooks and tore them to pieces. Focus on real work, he'd say. Get a real job. But Yoongi couldn't stop. Late at night, he taught himself MIDI production on a barely functioning computer, turning the chaos in his head into actual beats. At 17, he worked at a recording studio for wages that were basically insulting. Every single day became a math problem. $2 for noodles meant no bus fare. Bus fare meant going home hungry. Most days, he chose the noodles. Most days, he walked 2 hours back to his apartment, stomach full, but feet aching. During those walks, he'd buy lottery tickets. Same routine every week.
진짜 이런 새끼 얼마나 답답했냐면 내가 매주 로또를 1,000원치 샀어. 근데 이제 매주 안 되는 거야. 내가 한번 이야기했지 않나?
Maybe this time the numbers would hit. Maybe this time everything would change. They never did. But those long walks home, that gnawing desperation, it all went somewhere. Years later, he'd write First Love about the piano from his childhood, the instrument that represented everything he wanted but couldn't reach. This pain and suffering was all put into his song First Love, where every lyric dripped with the weight of those impossible years.
어릴 적 집안의 구석 한켠에 자리 잡은 갈색 피아노
But here's where things get interesting. 2010 rolled around and Yoongi heard about auditions at Big Hit Entertainment. Most kids just performed the required songs and hoped for the best. Yoongi did something completely different. He produced his own version of the audition track, layering beats and arrangements that proved he wasn't just talented, he had vision. The judges noticed immediately. They accepted him on the spot. Finally, after years of struggling, it seemed like his luck was turning. Except becoming a trainee didn't end his problems, it just transformed them into something more dangerous. Big Hit was tiny back then, operating on a shoestring budget. Trainees didn't get paid. Yoongi still needed money for food, for transport, for basic survival, so he got a delivery job riding a motorcycle through Daegu between training sessions. The company had strict rules against outside work, but what choice did he have? He kept it secret, kept his head down, kept hustling. Then 2012 happened. A car ran a red light. Metal met metal. Yoongi's body slammed into pavement. His shoulder dislocated on impact. Pain exploding through his entire left side. But the physical agony wasn't even the worst part. The terror was worse. If Big Hit discovered he'd been working against policy, they could terminate his contract. Everything he'd sacrificed for, gone in an instant. So Yoongi made a decision that would haunt him for years. He hid the injury, showed up to practice the next day moving carefully, biting down screams during dance rehearsals, popped painkillers like candy and kept his mouth shut. For months, he lived with that dislocated shoulder, that crushing secret, that constant fear of getting caught. Eventually, the company found out. But instead of kicking him out, CEO Bang Si-hyuk helped him recover. He even paid Yoongi's tuition fees personally during his trainee period.
그때 내가 너희들한테 그 글러스 잡혔는데 그때 교통사고 났었어. 가사 배달하다가 사고 빵 났어 4번에서. 배달하다가 사고 빵 났어. 그러니까 이제 말려 들어갔어 차 안에. 다음날 어깨가 아예 안 움직이니까 툭 빠져가지고 원래 어깨가 빠진다.
회사 사람들은 알아요?
모르지 이해를 안 했는데 그러니까 그때는 막 그런 거 이야기하면 그러니까 약간 막 잘릴 것 같고 막 나는 솔직히 별로 이게 더 이상 안 하고 싶고 막 그런 이야기 막 했었어. 하다가 그때 기억나는 게 이제 이게 다 기다려주고 너 나한테 기다려줄 테니까 그게 너무 기억나. 그래가지고 오케이 하겠다고. 그때 그래가지고 나 학비 같은 거 그때 회사에서 떼줬었던 거.
That kindness kept him going when quitting felt like the only option. When debut seemed like a pipe dream, he poured everything into his music during those dark days. The Last, Tomorrow, tracks that wouldn't see daylight for years but were born from pure survival instinct. Every bar was a confession, every beat was proof he was still breathing. What nobody tells you about debut is how anticlimactic it can feel. June 13th, 2013, BTS dropped No More Dream, and the response was lukewarm at best. 7 boys doing hip-hop in a market already drowning in idol groups. For 2 years, they performed in venues that were practically empty, wondering if anyone actually cared about their message. But Yoongi kept producing, kept writing, kept pushing their sound into territory that felt authentic instead of manufactured. His role expanded beyond rapping. He became one of the primary architects of BTS's sonic identity, crafting the music that would eventually separate them from everyone else. Then, 2015 hit different. The most beautiful moment in life era dropped, and suddenly people started listening. The music resonated on a level that transcended typical idol fare. Fans weren't just bopping to catchy hooks. They were connecting with raw, honest storytelling. Yoongi wrote introspective intro tracks about fear, about doubt, about the crushing pressure of trying to make it in an industry designed to chew you up and spit you out. 2016 brought wings, and with it came First Love, the autobiographical track about his childhood piano. Netizens heard his story for the first time. The poverty, the walks, the impossible choices. The response was overwhelming. But behind closed doors, Yoongi was crumbling. Depression hit in waves that left him gasping for air. OCD made simple tasks feel like climbing mountains. Social anxiety turned every public appearance into psychological warfare. Before performances, he'd shake uncontrollably backstage, crying in bathrooms where cameras couldn't find him. Fans wanted perfection. The company demanded results. The world expected gratitude. But success doesn't cure trauma, and fame doesn't erase pain. August 2016, Yoongi released his first mixtape as August D Track 3 was called The Last, and it detonated like a bomb in the K-pop industry. He rapped about depression, about therapy, about thoughts that terrified him. In conservative Korean society, idols didn't discuss mental health. They definitely didn't admit to seeking psychiatric help. Yoongi laid it all bare. The reaction was split down the middle. Some netizens praised his courage, others questioned whether he should be airing such personal struggles publicly. But millions of fans dealing with their own demons heard someone successful admit he was drowning too, and it changed everything. It gave them permission to seek help. It cracked open conversations about mental health in K-pop that had been sealed shut for decades. Yet even as Yoongi helped others heal, his own pain continued festering. That shoulder injury from 2012 never properly recovered. Rehab didn't work. Injections provided temporary relief. The pain was always there, lurking, waiting. Then success exploded in ways nobody anticipated. 2017, BTS won their first Billboard Music Award, becoming the first K-pop group ever to achieve that milestone. Yoongi produced Wine for Saran, and it won Best R&B at the Melon Music Awards. His reputation as a producer extended far beyond BTS. 2018, the group received the Order of Cultural Merit from the President of South Korea. They weren't just representing K-pop anymore, they were representing an entire nation on the global stage. But that representation came with a price tag written in blood and exhaustion. The schedules became inhuman, back-to-back concerts spanning continents, interviews that blurred into one jet-lag nightmare. Their bodies started breaking. 2018, Yoongi and V experienced severe burnout and exhaustion. On Suchwita, SUGA and V spoke about the situation. V admitted the exhaustion got so cruel, he caught himself thinking about hurting himself just to force a single day off. He had also spiraled into insecurity and self-doubt, comparing his own performance against the other members. SUGA confirmed that the exhaustion ran deeply within the entire group, making them seriously consider disbanding the team. Yet, despite the talk, they never chose to quit and continued grinding through exhaustion that went bone deep. Because the K-pop machine doesn't stop for individual health. It never has.
이게 이제 슈치타를 통해서 팬분들한테 처음 이제 얘기를 드리는 거라서 그러니까 뭔가 약간 좀 되니까 비교가 됐어요. 내가 멤버들이랑 템포가 다르고 느리고 조금 더 생각이 달라서 내가 조금 더 힘든 건가? 라는 생각을 진짜 많이 했거든요. 무대를 할 때 내 옆에 있는 멤버들을 보면은 참 즐거웠고 참 막 잘하고 완벽한데 나만 왜 이러지? 라는 생각을 되게 많이 했었던 것 같아요. 그래서 그 상대적으로 그런 번아웃이 좀 심했죠. 그때 18년도 때 딱 페이크런 뮤비 찍고 이제 너무 지쳐서 혹시 내일 안무 연습밖에 없던데 안무 연습 좀 쉬면 안 될까요? 했는데 이게 컴백이고 하다 보니까 중요한 안무 연습이니까 쉴 수는 없었죠. 그래서 이건 쉴 수가 없구나 해서 너무 부정적이고 힘든 마음이 너무 가득해서 난 너무 지금 이 상태로는 아무것도 안 될 것 같은데 진짜 쉴 수는 없을까? 방법을 계속 생각하다가 아무런 방법이 떠오르지 않아서 다쳐야겠다 라는 생각을 한 적이 있어요.
그치.
우리 팩러브 그거 발매 안 할 수도 있지 않았었어요?
우리가 막 못하겠다고 했었지.
근데 어찌저찌 열심히
그때
다시
티어를 쓰면서
맞아.
야, 우리가 지금 이런 상황에서 이런 곡을 써야 되는데 우리 지금 상황이 이러니까 우리 멤버들을 위해서 좀 써보자. 사실 티어는 대외적으로 알려져 있는 거는 뭐 이게 연인에 대한 뭐 이별 이런 이야기로 알려져 있지만 사실 티어는 다 이제 멤버들한테 하는 이야기였어.
Yoongi's shoulder deteriorated with every performance. Every dance move sent lightning bolts of pain down his arm. He tried everything to avoid surgery, more injections, more physical therapy, more pretending he could push through like he always had, but bodies have limits that willpower can't overcome. 2019. Doctors diagnosed him with a posterior labral tear in his left shoulder. The injury he'd hidden back in 2012 had degraded to the point where surgery wasn't optional anymore. It was mandatory. The thought of stepping away from BTS, from fans, from the group that had become his entire identity scared him more than the physical agony ever could. He delayed. He hoped. He tried one more round of treatments. Nothing worked. The pain became unbearable. He couldn't raise his arms. Daily life became a struggle. November 2020, Yoongi finally went for the surgery. Recovery took months. During that time, he couldn't perform, had to sit out BE album promotions, watched his members on stage without him, felt useless and hollow and disconnected from the only thing that had ever made sense. Depression cycles returned with a vengeance. He struggled with body image, with feeling like he was failing everyone who believed in him, with the deafening silence that comes when you're forced to stop moving for the first time in years. But something unexpected happened during that forced pause. For the first time, Yoongi had space to actually process his trauma instead of just channeling it into music. He realized he'd been running from pain his entire life, using creativity as a coping mechanism, but never actually healing. The surgery forced him to stop, and in that stillness, he found something he didn't know he'd been searching for: balance. 2021 brought successful recovery and return to performances. But this time, everything was different. Yoongi learned to establish boundaries, learned that prioritizing health wasn't weakness, learned that sustainable creativity requires rest, requires saying no, requires treating yourself like a human being instead of a content machine. During his recovery, he'd already been working. March 2020 saw D2 drop with Daechwita leading the charge. The track peaked at number 11 on the Billboard 200. The music video was cinematic, epic, showcasing dimensions of his artistry that pure rap couldn't capture. May 2020 brought 8, his collaboration with IU, which became a massive hit and introduced his production genius to an even wider audience. More importantly, Yoongi started using his platform for advocacy. He spoke openly about therapy, about medication, about the daily work of managing depression and anxiety. He became a voice for LGBTQ rights, for mental health awareness, for the importance of rest in an industry built on exploitation. Netizens watched him transform from the kid choosing between food and bus fare into a man who understood his worth extended beyond productivity and profit. April 2023 marked a defining moment. D-Day. His first official solo album under August D debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. He tied as the highest-charting Korean solo artist in history. His first solo world tour grossed over $57 million. Disney Plus released Road to D-Day, a documentary revealing the process, the pressure, the person behind the persona. Songs like Amygdala and Snooze showcased growth that only comes from walking through fire and choosing to heal on the other side. But military service was inevitable. September 2023, Yoongi enlisted as a social service worker due to his shoulder injury preventing active duty. For 21 months, he stepped away from music, from fans, from the identity he'd spent over a decade building. K-pop enlistment always feels like hitting pause on careers that move at lightning speed. Fans worried. Would the momentum survive? Would BTS be the same? June 2025. Min Yoongi completed his service and reunited with all 7 members. Over 160 songs registered with the Korea Music Copyright Association carry his name. Millions donated to orphanages, cancer foundations, disaster relief. But his real legacy isn't measured in numbers, it's measured in the lives he changed by refusing to pretend everything was perfect. Yoongi shattered the mental health stigma in K-pop by being brutally honest about his struggles. He showed an entire generation that seeking help isn't weakness, that depression doesn't disqualify you from greatness, that pain, when transformed through art, becomes medicine for others. From the kid choosing between noodles and bus fare to a global icon who's inspired millions, the sad truth behind his rise isn't just about struggle. It's about what happens when you refuse to let suffering define you, when you choose honesty over image, when you prioritize healing over performance. The future stretches ahead, both as a solo artist and BTS member, but Min Yoongi has already accomplished something more valuable than any award. He proved you can walk through darkness and come out the other side still standing, still creating, still fighting for tomorrow. And in an industry that often destroys the people who build it, maybe that's the most revolutionary act of all.